Good morning, everybody. We're going on now with chapter 7 and subsection 1, the beginning with Orota Chuva of Rav Kook, the lights of return. And we're talking about the impact of the concept of teshuvah, even when the tshuva is only a level of thought. A person is in their mind thinking about teshuvah, of return, of repentance. Perhaps their behavior hasn't yet caught up with intention. And Rav Kook's amazing idea here is that the mere intention, the mere focusing on the thoughts of teshuvah has a transformative effect, a profound effect. And we mentioned yesterday, just we read the first sentence, is that when one thinks about teshuvah, it has two effects, which in a certain sense seem to be contradictory. On the one hand, it gives us menucha. We talked about that word yesterday a little bit. Menucha, a certain sense of tranquility, like the word Noah, right? Tranquility. And on the other hand, koved rosh, seriousness, earnestness. In a certain sense, they don't seem to the same thing. We think of tranquility, you think of something like, you don't feel a burden on your shoulders. You're at rest. That's what the menucha literally means, rest. On the other hand, koved rosh, koved actually comes the word kaved. What does kaved mean? Heavy. So the difference between kind of like a sense of lightness, of rest, right, on the one hand, and on the other hand, the idea of heaviness don't sound like they go together. You're either light or heavy, right? So Rav Kook is explaining that, in fact, both go together. They both go together. How so? Because on the one hand, the notion that we can be freed from all of the load of the negative behavior of the past, right? That Chuva gives us the ability, as we talked about last week, to reach into the past and to transform that which already happened. So instead of this kind of suitcase that we carry around on our shoulders that keeps on getting heavier and heavier and heavier as we get older, right? Nothing is discarded because we have the burden of 25, 30, 40, 50, and more years of mistakes, and worse than mistakes. That gets to be a heavy load after a few decades, with all of the psychic damage that brings about because of the fact that we're behaving in a way which is not aligned with our innermost divine nature. Okay? So Chuva is the prospect of I can be freed from it. You go on a spiritual diet. All of that weight is tossed off. That's Chuva. So Chuva gives this sense of freedom. Wow, I can be freed of this burden, of the prospect of this lightness. Right? So that's menucha. That's this sense of comfort and restfulness. On the other hand, Chuva also comes together with what seems to be the opposite, which is a sense of heaviness, koved rosh, of seriousness and earnestness. So now we're going to begin to explain, well, where's the other thing come from? The other side, the side of earnestness and heaviness. So Rav Kook explains, and it is a little bit poetic. B'nikuda achat ktana me'orah hagadol, with a tiny little dot, nikuda, a tiny little point from the great light of teshuvah, right? Even when there's, right, we're talking about kavanah here, intent, thinking, even the thinking about teshuvah. So we're not experiencing teshuvah in its full-blown, robust actualization, just a point of it, a little speck of that light, a ray of that light. Even that, in that little point, is kfar munach osher ram v'nisa shel olam maleh. There rests within it a lofty and exalted joy, happiness, richness of a full world, right? That sometimes, I'm trying to think of an example. And I don't know why this example came to me. It's not a healthy example I'm about to give, okay? So imagine that you have in front of you, I don't know, your favorite pastry, okay? Some kind of Shavuot is coming, this amazing cheesecake, okay? So there it is, this nice size, delicious piece of cheesecake, and you take one little bite of it, a little nibble. So that little nibble, it's true, it's not the whole thing, but you're getting a taste of that. I see Dr. Koff over there is getting his, the glands were salivating there for a second. That even that little nibble gives you a taste of the sweetness of the whole thing. Now, of course, you'd like to have more of it, right? But even in that little nikuda, that little point, right? That's the word he uses. So even a little point, even if it's on the level of kavanah and intent, that already there resides within that the beautiful Hebrew phrase, Osher Ram V'nisa Shel Olam Maleh. There resides in it Osher. Osher means the joy and happiness. Like Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha. Happy is the person who sits in your house, we say in Psalms. So there resides within it this exalted and lofty happiness that is evocative and a taste of a whole world of the sublime joy of Teshuvah. Ve'im zeh, Rav Kook goes on, but together with this, in that Teshuvah, there's also the heaviness. What does that mean? He matzeget le'einei rucho tamid chovot shel hashlama, because that little taste presents before the eyes of one's spirit the obligation of completion. You see, to give our example, but it's kind of a little bit less sweet. You get a little taste of that cheesecake. That cheesecake gives you the desire for more. It presents before you the grandeur of that cheesecake, the sublime and lofty grandeur of that entire piece of cheesecake. But now that's just a metaphor. But the real thing is that little taste of Teshuvah, which is because you're thinking about it and you're intending to change and you want to change, that gives you a taste. And what do? You want more. Now, wanting more, that's responsibility. That's earnestness. Because to want more means to not just think about changing, it means to do the hard work of changing. So that's why even the thought of Chuva has both aspects. It has menucha, the lightness, the restfulness, the consolation, the comfort. At the same time, the kovod rosh, that sense of earnestness and responsibility. Because when you see what Chuva holds out for you, that promise, you get that taste, one wants to move further and actualize it. But that requires hard work. So that's why Chuva has these both elements together. Does everybody follow that idea? That's a powerful and important idea. Okay, so let's go on now. V'nodnot alav or matok anotein erech gadol v'kavu l'chayav. And this little taste of Chuva, which then inspires you to want to do the hard work of change. So it gives a person a sweet light. It's actually the idea of cheesecake. Maybe it's not so far from Rav Kook's metaphor here. He's talking about light, but he uses the word sweet. It gives you that sweet light, which imparts upon a person. It gives us a certain rhythm and direction and stability to one's life. Right? You know what life becomes when one does this? Chuva becomes the overarching theme of one's life, because the nature of one's life is it's a constant rhythm of messing up and fixing. That's We're trying to navigate every day. And every day is challenges, all kinds of challenges on every single different level. And we're always messing up. But at the same time, we have this correction, which is constantly part of our toolkit, which is Chuva. So Chuva allows us to be able to keep moving forward, to taste the sweetness, and to keep moving towards actualization every single day in ways that are appropriate to our circumstances. The Rav Kook goes on. Hatziur shel tshuva mahapech et kol avonot ubehelotehem yisurehem ruchaniim v'kiurehem lemusagim shel Aidan v'korach ruach. So Rav Kook says the following: when we imagine tshuva, we conceptualize tshuva, so that transforms all of the sin and the trauma of sin. Behelotehem. Behala means to, like nivhal, means a person is like sort of shocked. It's a strong word, okay? When a person sins, there's a consequence. We alluded to this earlier in our discussion. When a person sins, there is a traumatic effect. Yisurehem ruchaniim v'kiurehem. The spiritual affliction of sin and the ugliness of sin. Kiurehem. Mechuar means ugly. You know, we pollute ourselves through sin. And we suffer as a result. And Chuva holds out the prospect of the transformation of all of that negativity, all that negative energy, to a concept of Aidan and Korat Ruach. Aidan, help me out with that. Hebrew word Aidan, what's that mean? Like Gan Aidan, very good. Like the Garden of Aidan. What does Aidan really mean? Anybody know? Delight. Delight, right? So it takes all of that ugliness, all of that affliction, all of that trauma, and holds out the prospect of Aidan, of delight, v'korat ruach, and tranquility, How does it work? Mipnei sha'al yadam zoreach ladam omek hadat shel sinat hara. Because something amazing happens. You know what happens when we mess up and we feel the consequences, the negative consequences of messing up? Something marvelous that a person who's an angel doesn't experience. And unfortunately, you guys in this room, since you're angels, won't have this experience. That a person who's experienced the kind of traumatic burden of having messed up, that when a person does tshuva, and the fact that they experience all of this negative energy, ugliness, the affliction, the guilt, etc., through those things specifically, there flows to a person the depths of understanding of hatred of evil, right? That's an amazing thing. How much are we revolted at the prospect of evil? Does evil repel us? Or are we immune and kind of anesthetized? Are we anesthetized at the prospect of evil? Right? Or do we go through life in kind of paravness, a kind of mediocrity? Our spiritual antennas have been so numbed. Thank you, good word. Numbed that that evil doesn't produce a result. It doesn't. We don't react to it. We don't feel appalled by what we see in the world. But a person who thinks about teshuvah is super energized because they felt in their own flesh, they felt in their own conscience, in their own soul, in their own psyche, the horrendous consequences of sin. And when they, hang on one second, and then when they think about sin, they feel an incredible emotional response. They feel the abhorrence towards sin. Now, for you angels here in this room, I know it's hard for you to relate to, right? So you can go through life walking the straight and narrow, and it doesn't create that emotional resonance when one thinks about evil, because it's not something that you experienced the burdens of and the horrendous consequences of. But a person who is a Baal Chuva, even on the level of just the intent of doing Chuva, they are energized by the deep understanding of the consequences of sin. Yes, Larry.
I was thinking about Schindler's List, where he sees this, the glimmer. He sees the glimmer, and he's helping these people. And at the end of the movie, he realizes he had this fancy car. He says, "So many lives could have been saved by the car." That's so there's the joy of helping. Then I could have done even more.
Yeah, because he appreciates on a much deeper level.
Sold this fancy car and saved like who knows how many women.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go on now. And the other side of this is that in addition to the abhorrence of evil, that becomes an emotionally resonant and palpable feeling in them. They also feel a passionate love for God that builds up with them with a tremendous strength. They're not parav, they're not neutral. A person who has this concept of teshuvah, of return in their minds, they're not neutral. They're passionate. They're a passionate response to evil and a passionate love for good. Ulamala mikol cheshbon v'dat. Harehu mit anegal osher anocham. That person feels this tremendous delight at the comfort that Chuva offers them. Shemargish bo to anoam eloki. They sense this divine pleasantness, hamiyuchad lebalei Chuva, which is unique for balei Chuva. A person who's a penitent has this unique, enviable appreciation of that divine pleasantness. Hanaim bioter, imatama ma'aden shel shvirat halev v'dikut nefesh. With, and this is such an interesting idea, it's almost counterintuitive, with that special delight of a broken heart and a crushed soul. There's a certain sweetness in contrition. There's a certain sweetness in having a broken heart, which is a positive broken heart. You know, sometimes we have to tear down in order to build. People do remodeling on their homes. Think of a totally concrete example. You know, let's say a tornado struck a person's home. That's a disaster. But let's say you want to make your house a little bit nicer. You take a contractor out and he has to like tear down some walls to make it nicer. In both cases, there's tearing down. In one case, it's a disaster. In another case, that it's also tearing down, but it's tearing down, which is part of the reconstruction. There's a certain sweetness in the brokenheartedness, and that brokenheartedness is part of the reconstruction, the restoration of spiritual health. And that's all joined together with this deep, deep faith in the redemptive and saving power of Chuva. That Chuva holds out for us. And we believe it with such steady, deep, and strong faith. Emunah amuka, deep, deep belief in the power of Chuva to bring Hatzalah v'Yeshuat Olamim, salvation, which is perpetual. Olamim. Okay, on that note, we'll pause. We finished the chapter and we'll go on. Be'ezrat Hashem.